Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of Triple Overtime. Thank you so much for all of you who tuned in last week for the very special guest of Lofa Tatupu. It was such an amazing experience. This week, Dylan is actually taking the week off. We have Amaar back. Unfortunately, he couldn't be with us here for the Lofa interview. But you were there with us in spirit and you helped with some of the questions, Amaar. So super good to have you back. How's everything been going in the last, would be what, 2 weeks now since we did an episode together?
Man, okay, so I'll just, okay, so why I couldn't be there for the Lofa interview, right? I'll just tell
Right.
everyone real quick. The day that we're supposed to do that interview, this is like probably, I don't know, 3 hours before we're gonna go on. My fiance calls me into the nursery and she's like, there's like some wet spots on the floor. And my first thought's like, okay, the cat peed on the floor or something like that, right? Um, step on the floor and I'm like, oh no, this is like real, like, legit water spots, right?
Uh-oh. Yeah,
Um,
it's actually big deal wet.
yeah, yeah. So within a couple of hours, it goes from like wet spots on the floor to like two rooms are soaked and one of the hallways is soaked. Um, so it was just bad, right? It turns out there was a broken spigot that they had been using to like power wash our place. And it had a crack in it. So our unit got flooded. There was like an office building below us. It got flooded. And this was happening, while I'm trying to prep for like this Lofa interview. And I'm also
Right.
and I'm also working at the time, right? So from there, I let you and Dylan know, like, hey, okay, I'm not sure if I'm gonna be on. Okay, yeah, this definitely isn't gonna happen. By the end of the night, we were in a hotel, like our apartment put us up in a hotel. So ended up staying in a hotel for 3 days, which was kind of our unexpected like first travel experience with the twins.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, you've traveled with kids, like
Oh yeah.
I mean, just to go to a hotel that was like within driving distance, like just a crazy amount of stuff that you got to bring.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
it was just, yeah, it was a whole
It
hassle.
is so tough traveling with kids, especially as young as the two that you have.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because you just, we as parents, especially newer parents, you get into such this routine within the first year or two, because you don't do a lot of traveling. At least we didn't, and I know a lot of other parents typically don't, where you're not, I mean, we have a schedule for the kids and we stick to that pretty religiously. And then for our other two kids, our older boys, for those of you who don't know, I have three boys myself. It wasn't until they were about 2.5 years old when we started feeling comfortable going on family vacations and, just making sure that they were memories that they could have and so on and so forth. So yeah, I couldn't
Yeah,
imagine packing up my two less than 1 year old children. Or are they one yet, or are they a little younger than one?
yeah, they're 10 months old.
10 months. Okay, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
packing them up and taking them to a hotel for 3 nights. Holy cow, man.
Yeah, and I mean they were cool. Like they adapted. I was worried that they're not sleeping in their own crib, and they're not going to be
Right.
they're going to
Oh,
freak
they're
out. Like
babies, but as
yeah,
long
yeah,
as mom and dad are there, they got it. They're
yeah,
they're
yeah, yeah, they were
content.
fine. Like we were tripping, but they were cool. So but like it's all good. We're back home now. Everything's dry. We're still just kind of putting the place back to what it used to be. But yeah, but I was like, so I missed the Lofa interview. I think we taken like a week off before that. So like I feel
Hmm.
like it's been a while, man. I feel like
I know.
I haven't talked to you in like forever. So
Right? You got to knock some of that rust off. Well, don't
I know.
feel too alone. My mom actually just is going through the exact same thing like 2 days ago. She noted, woke up and felt that it was a little bit wet, I believe, in her closet or anything. And anyways, long story short, flooded out her pantry, her laundry room, her
Oh man.
closet. I mean, yeah, just, and she's dealing with all that right now. So you're not the only one who's had to deal with it. There is misery, there is company in misery, or misery loves company, as
Mm-hmm.
they say. So Getting past all of that depressing stuff, we have a special episode this week. This is going to be our NFL draft special. So we are focusing just on the NFL draft. We're going to be going through a bit of a mock draft ourselves here for a few picks, and just kind of analyzing what the first day of the NFL draft is going to look like, or what we anticipate it looking like. So, Amaar, why don't you take it away, and let's get right into it.
Yeah. So, if y'all don't know, April 29th out of Cleveland, NFL draft this year. I guess there's going to be, people and players at the draft, as opposed to last year, was the COVID, remote draft with Roger Goodell, like, reporting from his basement. Yeah, this one's going to be like legit. Some of the top picks are going to be there. So which kind of brings me to, like, why do you think that the NFL draft is just such a much bigger event than all the other drafts? Like, I mean, it's a whole, it's a whole thing. Like, it's not just, oh, like the draft happened. Like, it is a whole
Right.
TV event. Like,
I
why?
think it's got to be the marketing of the league, honestly. I mean, that's the only thing that, because the NBA draft, the MLB draft is like, I forget when it happens every year, and typically the only news I get from it is like the Mariners first round draft pick or whatever. But for the MLB, it's like, it's cool, but those aren't guys typically that you'll see for like 3 or 4 years. They'll go through the farm system, and some will pan out. Some guys will jump right into the league after a year or half a year in the minors or whatever, but that's just like really rare to happen, right? And then with the NBA, that has become a bit more. And it's crazy because with like such a short attention span that like people as a whole have today, you would almost think that the NBA draft would be more appealing because there's only 2 rounds, right? So it's like where the NBA in terms of regular season falters, that the NFL does well, is the fact that every game counts in the NFL, right? 16 weeks, 16 games. There's not a single game that if you're a fan of any one team that you're watching and you're biting down on a pillow every single time, because that like this could be the one game that doesn't give us home field advantage or get us to the playoffs or whatever. Whereas on the flip side of that, you have 7 rounds in the NFL draft. And I know a good majority of people, including myself, that I watch all 3 days, right? Like I will watch all the way to the very last pick, you know what I mean, of the NFL draft, from number 1 to the very last one. But again, it seems still more popular than the NBA. And I think the NFL has a richer history, though, of players like late round players, undrafted players, as well as a combination of, number 1 overall draft picks and guys with high expectations and boom or bust, so on and so forth. So that's maybe my best thought process as to why the NFL draft is so popular, especially compared to any other pro sports league draft. Just because, I mean, typically there's always really good storylines, and you've got a ton this year. Is New England going to move up? Who's San Fran going to take? What is Seattle going to do with only 3 picks? You just had the Chiefs trade a bunch of draft picks for an offensive tackle. So, yeah, it's just there's a lot of great narratives that surround the NFL draft. That's the only thing I could think of.
I think part of it, and I think every sport, the draft represents like hope, right? Like hope for the future. Right. Like, our team can get better. I think in the NBA that there's only like a select smaller number of teams that are like realistic championship contenders.
Right.
And the rest of the league, I mean, you have a lot more fan bases that accept, like we're not going to be good for the next few years. And so, this draft is exciting, but it's not like, oh, we're going to be great because we got this guy now. Right.
That is kind of the beauty of the parody of the NFL is, I mean, we've literally seen teams go from just absolutely horrendous, like dumpster fires,
Mhm.
and then they put together one or two really good drafts, and then all of a sudden they're like instant contenders for the next 3 to 5 years. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They get that little window of potentially making or winning a Super Bowl.
Right. And I think like with the NFL, you know, like every NFL fan base thinks, you know, we're 1 or 2 years away if they're
Right.
not already there, if they're not already a contender. And so like this draft, this first round pick could be the guy that turns us around. And so I think that creates for more excitement around the NFL draft, more optimism around the NFL draft, as opposed to, you know, if you're like, you know, an Atlanta Hawks fan in the NBA.
Right.
It's like you constantly have lottery picks and first round picks, and you're just like, oh, okay, cool. Like, you know, it's not going to make us a contender, but like,
You're just hoping they finally bank on that once in a generation
right.
talent that shows up every 10 years or whatever.
Right. But if you're a fan of the Atlanta Falcons, it's like, yo, if we kill this draft and, you know, the next draft and, you know, our guy who was hurt last year is healthy, then like we're right in the thick of things. We're right.
Right.
You know,
Well, shoot, look at the Jacksonville Jaguars. I mean, you got to figure they're going to take Trevor Lawrence. They've made some pretty decent moves in the offseason as a whole. They've paid some guys. I mean, I don't want to get ahead of myself because they were just horrendous last year, but they've got a new culture in there. They're bringing in some obviously new talent. You can tell with some of the moves that they made this offseason that they do have Trevor Lawrence in mind right out of the gate before the guy's even been picked. So, I mean, they have a real opportunity to go from like worst to maybe not first, but definitely a competitive team, you know?
Yeah. It kind of, and, you know, kind of like what you said about, you know, the NFL draft is going to bring you immediate impact players as opposed to MLB or like the NHL draft where, you know, they have to go through the farm system and like, you know, you're not going to hear from them again for a couple of years.
Well, and even the NBA draft, I mean, a lot of those guys, again, unless you're LeBron James or Kobe Bryant, who sat, or whatever, typically, I mean, look at most of the guys that we've seen this year that went, you know, like the LaMelo Ball, he was never a starter. You know, he came off the bench the entire season. Weissman, what is even going on with him? That's who the Warriors picked, right?
He's out for the year now. Like he got hurt.
Is he? Okay, yeah. So he's hurt, I think he started, but he was like pretty limited minutes, right? Like
I think he was averaging I want to say like 12 and 6 or something. I have to look it up, but
right.
You know,
I only think
he showed potential, but yeah, he wasn't
right.
Like, immediate.
Yeah, I only think he was playing like 20, 25 minutes. I could be wrong on that, maybe a little light, but my point is that even typically in the NBA, guys are not just kind of thrown into the fire. In the NFL, if you're not only thrown into the fire, but if you don't produce sometimes in as little as a single season as a rookie, they're ready to trade you and get rid of you and move on. So like that's true. I mean, that in itself is a big enough difference where you're like, all right, well, I guess I should definitely watch the draft to see what names to look for and everything else. I mean, Josh Rosen is a perfect example of it. You know, the guy was he was like pick number 12 or top 10 pick. And within a year, they're like, I think we're going to go with Kyler Murray. So
yeah. And there was talk about that with Tua this past year.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
You know,
it was legitimate talk. This wasn't like
half a season worth of starts. And then it's like, he may not be the guy. And, you know, there was talk that they might want to get rid of him, which
and they're legitimate talks too. Like those are talks that I guarantee you went on in behind doors in the front office of Miami. Right. Like, hey, is this really the guy that like, that's how quick it happens. You know, it's mind boggling to me. But yeah, I mean, that's what makes the NFL draft so intriguing because you watch this whole process play out and it's so, and then you just get to watch their journey, you know, between the NFL draft, Hard Knocks, and then just the social media presence and how active these athletes are. You really get like every insight possible to their journey. And like for me in particular, I pick a handful of players that I just latch on to and I follow that journey as closely as possible. So
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah. And each team in the NFL draft, I mean, you're bringing in like a batch of rookies. It's I think in the NBA, it's like, you're maybe bringing in like one or two because, there's only 2 rounds of the draft. Like
Right.
maybe you're bringing in three. And a lot of times, those second rounders, they end up not making the roster or they go to the G League or something. NFL, it's like, you're bringing in, 4 or 5, 6, who could be like impact
Like contributors.
rookies.
And that's
Right.
what's crazy. So in the NBA, like, not only if you're being picked in the second round of the NBA draft, you might as well be picked in the 7th round of the NFL draft at that point, right? And like what's even crazier is if you're not a lottery pick, right? Like even that is like considered like if you're a first rounder in the NFL draft, you're a first round, like there is prestige that goes behind that. And the NFL in the NBA draft, like if you're not picked within the first 10, 11 picks or whatever, then it's really like, nah, yeah. I mean, he was picked 30th overall. Okay, who cares? You know what I mean? Like
a lottery pick. Lottery pick in the NBA is like prestigious. And then NFL, it's like the whole first round.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, if not in this day and age, the first and second round, I would even argue the first 3 rounds because people have really come to understand that like those first 3 picks are typically the guys that like you are going to see their name for the next 3 to 5 years, or you should. And they are guys that the team and the franchise thinks like should and will have an immediate impact on the game.
You'll see legit like NFL veterans get traded for 4th and 5th round picks because no one wants to give up a 3rd round pick.
Randy Moss, Hall of Famer, like had punched his ticket to Canton, and he was traded for what was it, a 4th or 5th round pick, man.
Yeah. The other element too, I think, is just also goes to show how big college football is, and that more of the players who are going to get picked, people know. And so you're kind of combining, because college football fans are going to follow, the NFL draft, and, NFL fans are going to follow it, obviously. So you're kind of combining the two, these two huge sports, and with college basketball, a lot of people don't watch until the tournament, so these guys who they're going to see get drafted, they maybe only saw them play a few times, and a lot of them are one and dones, and so there was only one season to see him play. Whereas in college football, they're coming into the NFL more known. You know what I mean? Because they were in college for a few years, and college football is just so huge. So, I think, all of that combined, I think, makes it why this is like the biggest event as far as all the drafts go.
Easily.
Yeah,
it's probably the biggest off-season event in general, like of all of the sports.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, that first couple of days of NBA free agency is always crazy.
I mean, it's crazy, but it doesn't get near the exposure or I mean, we talk about the draft all year, I mean, you're talking from the minute this draft ends, you like literally the next day you will see like what's called way too early mock drafts, and they're already projecting where the best and brightest of college football is going to end up in 2022. I mean, it's nuts. It's crazy.
Yeah. So we know who's going number 1 this year. It's going to be Trevor Lawrence going to Jacksonville. I mean, I think everyone's going to be shocked if that.
Are you positive? I was really thinking that Kyle Pitts was going to be desperately needed in Jacksonville.
Well, he did go to Florida, and Urban Meyer's a Florida guy. You might be onto something there,
right?
But so this is going to be a big year for quarterbacks. Like you could look at the top, like 4 or 5 teams, and like each of them has a legit possibility to take a quarterback. Who do you think, like, out of this QB class, which player kind of has like is going to have the most like immediate pressure to perform, or like the highest expectations, knowing that other than Lawrence, we don't know yet where they're all going to go. But like, if you could just say now, like, who's going to have the most pressure on them?
I mean, right now, obviously, I think it has to be Trevor Lawrence, just for the pure simple fact that like he has had this huge buildup. I mean, he's being touted as the prodigy, the next greatest quarterback, the best thing since Peyton Manning, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, we've been for anybody that's been diehard following football, like in general, you've watched this kid play since he was 17 years old, right? So, and then honestly, as much as it seems crazy to say it, I think the next guy in line is Mac Jones, and a lot of it is because Mac Jones is going, regardless of where he's picked, he's going to come into the league with a lot of the same, I guess, like almost doubts, right? That you saw with guys like when Jimmy Garoppolo first started with San Francisco. Not that they weren't unfounded, but it was like, man, that guy caught a lot of flack for, very limited playing time that we ever saw in New England. Baker Mayfield, when he got drafted, I mean, I swear that guy could throw 50 touchdowns this year, and they would still, like, the media, fans alike, would still talk about trading him or whether or not he deserved to have that fifth-year option picked up, which I think is an incredibly smart move by Cleveland. He's the best quarterback in the franchise's history since Bernie Kosar. But that's for a whole different week in conversation. But just guys like that, regardless of how Jeff Garcia was that type of quarterback they have really good, effective, productive seasons, and they may not blow your hair back, like the Russell Wilsons or the Patrick Mahomes, but they're good, effective guys, in their own right. But for whatever reason, I'm rambling now, but for whatever reason, those guys just catch a lot of flack and they catch a lot of doubt, and they catch a lot of heat for not being winners or whatever. So I think Mac Jones is going to fall in that next boat or in that next tier, honestly, because a lot of these other guys, they've kind of cemented who they are as players, so.
I can't believe you just disrespected Tim Couch like that. Just overlooked. Anyway, I'm gonna say,
I'd argue to say that Baker Mayfield's the best quarterback in Browns franchise history, period. But
I mean, it's really hard not to say that, just because we're still riding high off the playoff. The playoff appearance.
But I mean, even if you just look at the numbers, man, the guy has done stuff that nobody else in that franchise has ever done, so.
Well, I mean, we got to give that to Otto Graham, because he won like 10 championships pre-Super Bowl. So I think that Justin Fields out of Ohio State, I think he is going to have the most pressure. He was late into the college football season, was still considered like kind of the obvious number 2 behind Trevor Lawrence. Not just number 2 quarterback, but number 2 overall pick, right? And between then and now, he slipped a little bit. I've seen, some people think he might, fall out of like the top 10 or, at least the top 5. And people are wondering well, why? What's going on with him? Something wrong with him?
Something's got to be going, because that's the thing is, though, that's the stuff that not just interviews, but that's the little dirt, you see on shows like Ballers and stuff like that. That's that little behind the curtain dirt. Something's there that is just not being released.
So whether there is or isn't, people are kind of wondering now, what happened to him being the definite number 2 guy. And then he's got this Ohio State quarterback thing that he kind of has to overcome, and he has to kind of make up for. There's this and kind of well earned that Ohio State quarterbacks don't do anything in the NFL.
They don't.
Yeah. And
it's unfortunate. And they've had, in regards to strictly college football, they've had some of the greatest talent of all time at that position come out of that school, but it hasn't translated. Does not translate to the NFL for whatever. Even as far back as didn't Trey Smith go to Ohio State? Heisman Trophy winner.
No, you're talking about Troy Smith. The one, the Heisman winner. Yeah, didn't
he go to Ohio State?
Yep, he did.
Yeah. That's another guy that. Drafted in the 5th round or something. Off season after winning the Heisman Trophy.
Off the top of my head, it's the most successful Ohio State quarterback recently has been Terrell Pryor, and that wasn't at quarterback. That was it. That was him playing receiver.
And even still, that's a pretty up and down career, man. Came in, showed some pretty early success, and then that totally went to crap. and then became a receiver, right? So then he bounced around, like even went to the Seahawks for a short period of time, got cut, and then became a receiver, and then kind of started looking like an elite receiver. Had 1,000-yard receiving year with the Browns, if I remember correctly. Had some pretty impressive seasons with them. And then, like, what do you hear about? Is he even still in the league?
No, he's not. I think
Yeah.
he was with
So
Washington last, I want to say, but
right.
but
Kind of
yeah,
bounced
Fields.
around. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
like you said, purely as an athlete, that's what his whole shtick was,
And now Justin Fields has to he kind of has to answer for this now. It's like he's
Right.
got the whole, Ohio State's reputation for producing quarterbacks is like on his shoulders right now. And so it's like between that and the, people wondering why is he not number 2 anymore? And we don't know what team he's going to go to, but I just think, yeah, he's going to have the most pressure, to kind of show right away that okay, I'm not going to be a bust like the other guys,
Right.
like the other Ohio State guys that came before me, and also prove that he can play. And then, there's that, well, he's a great athlete. Was he a great quarterback? So he kind of has to overcome that thing. So that's why he'd be my pick. But are there, of all these quarterbacks, Trevor Lawrence, Justin Fields, Zach Wilson, Mac Jones, the ones that we're hearing about the most. Is there a guy that isn't getting talked about enough that you think is actually going to be better than people think, or should go higher than he's being mocked right now?
Not necessarily for me, that is. I think that, to be perfectly honest, I'm kind of tired of the quarterback talk in general. I get it. This is an incredibly deep draft. It's a for quarterbacks. This is the quarterback echelon. I guess that if I would have to pick, it'd be maybe Davis Mills. I don't know that he's necessarily a first round pick, but I think that he could potentially be a first round pick, once he falls to teams like if the Saints are looking for a young quarterback, if the Browns maybe want a super late round first rounder, or maybe they trade back to an early second to get somebody that could potentially be an heir to Baker Mayfield if they choose. If the Tampa Bay Bucks maybe want to take a flyer on a late first round quarterback, Davis Mills is a guy that could be there. Again, you'd be taking a flyer on him. He's only had 11 college starts, but he's very athletic. He's very much a guy that, like Lamar Jackson, that can move, do things with his feet, move well in the pocket. He has a strong arm. So that's a guy definitely to look for. But otherwise, I think for the most part, things are pretty set in stone at this point. And a lot of the mock drafts that I'm seeing have it pretty well dead on, other than the big question mark of where Mac Jones is going to fall.
I mean, the Bucks are set at quarterback for the next 7 years, so I'm not sure why. That guy they got now. I mean, he's for the better part of the next decade. He ain't going nowhere.
So. That's why you take the flyer on Davis Mills, and then the hope is that by year 7 he's understood the system well enough.
When Tom Brady is 55 years old, and finally it's time for him to
right.
I think that, and this isn't someone that, should be or will be picked anywhere near the first round, but Ian Book from Notre Dame. He's been, all the projections and mock drafts I've looked at, he's either not getting picked, or the highest I've seen him is in the 6th round. Now we know, we were just talking about him, who went in the 6th round before, Tom Brady, right? Ian Book's, I'm not saying he's going to be Tom Brady, but I think he can play in the league. And part of the reason why he's getting written off is similar to the Justin Fields thing, where seeing people these Notre Dame quarterbacks don't do anything in the league. And just like Fields, I'm I don't think that's a fair thing to put on any player, the history of the school that they went to, because it's that has nothing to do with them. And so I think
Well,
that,
Notre Dame did produce the second greatest quarterback to ever play the game.
oh
So
yeah, but like they're saying like in recent years,
right.
yeah, yeah. Somebody would punch you for saying that Montana's the second greatest quarterback. They're like,
Well,
he's undefeated in the Super Bowl though. So go.
leave the comments below, please.
Yeah.
Drop the hate.
But yeah, it's like, Book's kind of getting that same thing. The Notre Dame quarterbacks don't produce. He's gonna have to kind of answer for that. But from what I saw from him in college, it's like I think he can play in the league. I mean, yeah, he's not a first or second day pick. But he can be a backup on someone's roster. It's like, he's got enough skill. He's smart. He's got enough athleticism. I mean, he was 3-year starter at Notre Dame. He's like their all-time leader in wins. It was like 72 touchdowns to 20 interceptions. Like, the resume is there, and I feel like if he gets a chance, then he'll do something. He'll
Right.
hang around. So I think
Right.
he's not getting, he's being written off, I think, a little too early. But your team, Seahawks, probably not picking a quarterback, I'm guessing, and
I would hope not.
and don't have a lot of opportunity to pick a quarterback. Like, what's kind of your, I don't know, like pre-draft analysis going into this for the Seahawks and their only 3 picks that they have so far?
It's gonna be a tough one. I at this point, being a diehard Seahawks fan for as long as I have, and watching the John Schneider and Pete Carroll era as intently as I have, I fully expect a trade to happen on draft day, if not a day or two before, that will allow them to accumulate more picks. But to be perfectly honest, they don't even need to do it. I mean, Lofa Tatupu even said it last week in the interview that this last year's Seahawks was probably the deepest team that he's seen. And I agree. I think that they had a lot of depth in a lot of areas, and they did lose some guys, but they brought a lot more people back than a lot of people assumed. A lot of people thought that they were going to lose Chris Carson and that they weren't going to find a way to fix the offensive line, and that they were going to lose a lot of the key pieces that they ended up actually re-signing and bringing back into the fold. So they didn't really lose a lot of depth. So, I mean, as long as if they can stick to their game plan and get the highest guys on their board where they need to and not have to reach or anything like that, which is why we could see some trades. We could see the Seahawks don't pick till the second round. And so we could see them get to that point and then say, well, God, everybody we have here is we've got graded out for a 5th round pick. So then they trade back, right? But if they can hit on the 3 picks that they have, they can add not only one starting contributing player, but a couple really key depth guys. Personally, I would like to see them target the best possible defensive back in the second round. And then if not that, then defensive line, obviously, for sure, an edge rusher or a defensive tackle. Either one of those things positions would work. But yeah, I'd like to see them hit a defensive back, a defensive tackle, and a linebacker, because they are going to need a little bit more depth here at linebacker. We don't know if KJ Wright's coming back or not. So we need to account for that. Jordan Brooks will probably fill that role, and he'll do it very nicely. He showed out huge last year once he finally got the opportunity to do so. So yeah, they need depth, and that's a really good position to be in. Their Super Bowl window is very much open. The little bit of flame that started with Wilson and the Seahawks has seemed to be stomped out pretty quickly. They made some really key moves to improve the offense, the offensive line, everything else. So honestly, I think they could get away with this draft with only 3 picks and still, at least in my book, have an A+ draft.
What do the fans and media say if they don't draft an offensive lineman after everything that went on this offseason, all the talk?
Honestly, I don't I don't think that it'll be that big of a deal. I think they did enough in the offseason. They traded for Gabe Jackson. They brought back Posick, which some people weren't super thrilled about, but to me, that's a huge move for continuity. And Posick's a guy that when he was healthy and did start getting the games and getting in rhythm, he actually played really, really well. We've got an all rookie right guard coming back. Dwayne Brown, who has been the absolute best free agent acquisition Seattle has. Acquisition to trade for that Seattle has picked up since Marshawn Lynch, via trade that is. So I mean, yeah, they pretty much have all those holes filled. So I think that in terms of Seahawks Twitter, Seahawks Facebook, etc., most fans are really wanting them to, okay, hey, we got our offense set. We filled the holes that we needed to. We did what we needed to. Now let's get a defensive lineman, a defensive back, and some help at linebacker.
Do you think then that would be more of like an issue with like national media or like people that don't follow the team that much, that like, they just heard all this, Russell Wilson wants, more protection. And then if they don't draft a lineman, because these are people that haven't necessarily followed that, like, oh, they re-signed this guy and they traded for this guy, because it's linemen, so they're not big names, right? So it wouldn't huge headlines. So that might maybe more like a national media thing, like, oh my God, the Seahawks didn't pick a lineman after all that, Russell Wilson stuff. He's going to be pissed and, all that.
The Gabe Jackson news was pretty big news just because he was, he had kind of a down season last year, but he is an all-pro player. So that was somewhat, but you're right. I mean, a lot of people wouldn't know about Posick. A lot of people wouldn't know about, oh my gosh, I feel like a fool. His name is slipping me. Damian Lewis, I believe is his name. Yeah, he is the right guard for the Seahawks who had a really, really incredible season last year, actually, as a rookie. So he's a guy that I very much anticipate will be making Pro Bowls and all pros here very soon. So yeah, I think that without understanding the context of like having that guy, being another year older, bringing in Gabe Jackson, having Dwayne Brown, bringing back Posick. And, I feel like a darn fool for not doing my homework a little bit better. I know they addressed right tackle. I just cannot, for the life of me, remember with whom. And that may be something that they consider taking a look at, but I highly doubt it. I think they're really going to focus on defense because they went out and got all the nice shiny pieces for offense in the free agent market. So,
my team, the Browns, if y'all have listened, we're picking 26th in the first round, which to me is like, it's just strange, like, so I looked up. So with the exception of like 2019, it's when in Cleveland, when we traded for Odell Beckham. So they traded their first round pick that year. Right. Outside of that, the lowest first pick, the lowest top pick that they've had in a long time was in 2011. They picked 21st, right? So outside of that, I mean, it's been, we've had some number one picks. We've had, top fives, top tens, because the Browns were bad, right? Worse you are, the higher pick you get. So I'm so used to having high draft picks that this year is just weird for me, because it's like, we're not picking until 26, and it's because we're good. It's not because we traded the pick, because we were good enough to not have to pick until 26. And so it's just it's weird. It's like the reverse of the Patriots, where they're so accustomed to picking, 32nd, 28th, 29th. And now this year they're in the top 10. It's like we're
right. Are they top 10 or are they top 15?
I think they have the 10th pick, I believe.
Let me double check here.
Which, and they might have traded into that pick, I think. So maybe record wise, I think they were top around 15 or something. But I think they've traded up to 10, I want to say. Let me see. Yeah. Anyway,
why 15? Yeah,
Oh,
even
15,
still
15?
though, they're
Okay.
15. I just wanted to
It's just
confirm
higher
that.
than they usually pick, right?
But even
Like,
yeah, I was just gonna
yeah,
say, even still, this is a team that's used to picking no earlier than like 28th. You know what I
right.
mean?
Yeah, so Cleveland's like in the opposite position of that. And it's I think like the good front offices like New England and like two teams in Cleveland's division, like Baltimore and Pittsburgh, right? They're accustomed to picking usually later in the first round, usually
Right.
pretty good. Um, I think those are kind of the front offices that like separate themselves from everyone else, is being able to still get, Pro Bowl, all pro players with those late first round picks as
Oh
opposed to
yeah.
always being in the top 10. So I think if Cleveland can like, if we could be more like Pittsburgh, more like Baltimore, and if we're going to be consistently getting late picks for the foreseeable future, which would be awesome because that would mean that our team's good. That would just it's not something we're used to doing, but like I would love to see that. And they don't have some glaring position of need, which is another different thing this year. It's like, it's
Right.
like, oh my God, like we need a quarterback, or like we need
If
a running back.
anything, they
Like
have luxuries this year. I mean, I
they're
honestly
solid.
think they could trade OBJ and be totally fine without it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They
And
have,
that's been talked about a lot, is like,
yeah,
yeah, like he was expendable. It's I think after people saw that they won after he got hurt and that they could win without him, it's like, oh, okay,
right.
well now he's a great asset. We can get
Exactly.
more stuff from him. So, but kind of like in that, this is just a random question. Talking about positions of need, and this is for any sports draft. Like when you go into the draft and people are saying about a team, like they're desperate for linebackers. If you're a linebacker on that team, like how's that make you feel? Like you're
I
watching
know,
QB,
right?
and people are like, like the Seahawks like really need a receiver, and like you're a receiver on the
You're
team, and
like,
you're like,
oh,
oh, I thought,
okay, I guess.
okay, yeah,
Yeah.
like damn, so I just suck. Okay, cool.
Right. Like, oh, I guess I'm just nobody. I guess there's nobody on this team that fills that roster spot at all, right?
Yeah. And it's not like if you're not like the quarterback, I mean, quarterbacks are used to, getting bashed and criticized like all the time. But, if you're kind of like a lower key dude at like a different position, and like, yeah, you hear like, this team desperately needs a safety. And you're like, I thought I was doing pretty good. Okay. Like,
I play safety, but okay.
yeah. And then they pick one and you're like, oh, okay. So do I need to like start packing my stuff, or like,
No kidding, dude.
like am I a backup now?
Yeah, I couldn't imagine that thought process.
But what what teams do you think, like, because we talked about the immediate impact ability in the NFL draft, like you could turn your franchise around with one or two draft classes.
Right.
What team out there do you think can like take that big jump with this draft, whether it's just with whoever they get in their first round or with their whole draft class? Like they're kind of on the cusp and they bring in the right rookies this year, and that could take them to like next level. Like who's that team for you?
It's tough because I don't know that it's really one team. I think there's a lot of teams that could really take a huge step forward with a good draft this year. I think Denver's in really good position to do that. If they can actually finally hit on quarterback, depending who they take, whether they get the opportunity to get Trey Lance or Justin Fields or Mac Joe, whoever it is. As long as that's a hit finally for once in however many decades it seems, they could take a huge step forward. I think Carolina's in really, really good position, as long as they can get some offensive line help. They do need a little bit of help on defense as well. Either one of those sides of the ball, as long as it's a good, solid pick, can really turn it around. And then really the team that I think will have the biggest turnaround, and I know they traded up to be in this position, but it's going to be San Francisco. I mean, that's just a team that is so absolutely loaded with talent. I haven't seen them this loaded with talent since the Jim Harbaugh days. And so they keep, it's like, just like with the Jim Harbaugh days, they would get on track and then the injury bug would hit, or something catastrophic. Alden Smith would screw up, and they'd lose him for half a season or whatever, which I shouldn't say that too lightheartedly, because he's a Seahawk now, and just got booked and released on a charge. But anyway,
I was gonna say he's already been arrested.
Right. But they have so much talent on both sides of the ball, right? They have incredible talent on the defensive line. I think they're going to be okay in the secondary. They've got great talent on the offensive side of the ball. And so I think with that one pick, again, whichever quarterback it is, as long as that quarterback pans out, you're an instant Super Bowl favorite, or at least a Super Bowl contending team.
Okay. I think that the team I'm kind of looking at that can do that, I think, is the Giants. I'm just, they were 6-10 last year, which was good enough for second in that division. They addressed the defense in free agency. They re-signed some guys that they needed to re-sign. They brought in like Adoree Jackson at corner, like Danny Shelton on the defensive line. They need they also they brought in some help on offense too, but I think they need another playmaker or two offensively. They could use another edge rusher, and they're picking 11th, and so they can get this is a deep class for receivers. They could get Devontae Smith, the Heisman winner, at 11th spot. If they want to go edge rusher, this draft isn't like loaded. It's not top heavy at that spot. And so from what I've seen, with all the projections, whoever they think is the best edge rusher in this draft could possibly still be available at 11.
Oh yeah.
So they could walk out of this draft with the top edge rusher. He could end up being, better than people project. And so, yeah, they can if they hit with that pick and then, their second and their third, they can, go from, and they got Saquon Barkley coming back. That division's right there for them to take.
Oh yeah.
So, they kill it with this draft, and it's they could flip that 6-10 into a 10-6, or, a 9-7 or 8-8, which, that would have got him in the playoffs this year.
Yeah. So, yeah. And Daniel Jones has shown signs that he can play in the league.
He's okay,
Right. So, you have a good draft, you hit on some good picks, on some key picks, maybe hit on that first rounder, get yourself a third, fifth, and a seventh that, kind of pan out to some kind of contribution or whatever. And yeah, they could really be in position to be back in the playoffs here very, very soon.
Yeah. Now, speaking of the NFC East, I just remembered it was around this time a year ago, I think, maybe a little longer, when Washington dropped the nickname and they went with Washington Football Team. And the assumption was that I thought by now they'd have picked a new name and a new logo and all that. And we're going into this draft, and I haven't heard anything about, they got their new name, they're going to roll it out. They're going to, even I saw the official NFL draft hats, and they still just say Washington Football Team.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
I think they've just embraced it, man. I mean,
are they really just not going to pick a new name? Are they just going to stick with the Washington Football Team?
Why not?
All right. I'm going to ask you, because this is your fam. Is your cousin Daniel Snyder just is your fam out here just being a big baby and I'm not going to pick a new name because you guys
just as petty as possible. You won't let me have the Redskins. Well, I just won't have a name then.
Yeah.
We'll just be the football team. That's all we're going to be. That's it. We're done. We're done naming this team.
When you go to the Snyder family 4th of July thing this year, I need you to find cousin Dan and be like, yo, what's up? I thought y'all were picking a name. Or you just not
come on, bro. Just call them the Washington Senators. Get it over and done with. Let's move on. Okay.
I was just wait a minute. Are they really just gonna roll with this? Just forever? What the hell? Oh my gosh. Yeah, man.
And with that being said, Amaar, this has been our special draft episode. I hope you guys have learned some things. I hope we touched on some great points and, brought in some different perspective for you to look at the draft this coming Thursday, depending on when this is posted. So either today or tomorrow or in a couple days. Anyways, thank you so much as always for tuning in and viewing. If you are a triple OG and you have watched this video all the way to the end, I would hope that you have already done it. But if you haven't, make sure to hit that like button, nice little thumbs up, ding, and hit that subscribe button. Drop a comment, join in on the conversation. I'm Amaar, or I'm sorry, that's Amaar. I'm Austin for Triple Overtime. Thank you so much again for watching. And peace.